مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. لأعوام كانت الحركة المحافظة أقوى قوة مؤثرة في السياسة الأمريكية. فازت أحيانا بالانتخابات، ومن بينها 5 من آخر 9 منافسات رئاسية. حتى حين لم تفوز سيطرت على الأجندة، مثل العبارة الشهيرة التي قالها الرئيس الليبرالي بيل كلينتون حين قال: انتهى عصر الحكومة الكبيرة، ما شكل فوزا فلسفيا كبيرا للمحافظين. وبعد جيل من السيطرة الليبرالية في الستينات والسبعينات من القرن العشرين، سيطرت الأفكار المحافظة على الجيل الأخير، إلا أنه لأول مرة في الذاكرة الحديثة لن يرد اسم المحافظ في بطاقة الإقتراع في نوفمبر. هيلاري كلينتون ديمقراطية وسطية، لا تميل كثيرا إلى اليسار، ولكنها ليست محافظة دون شك. ودونالد ترامب المرشح الجمهوري ليس محافظا تقليديا بالتأكيد فيما يتعلق بالقضايا المالية أو القضايا الاجتماعية أو قضايا السياسة الخارجية. ليس هناك مسمى ينطبق عليه حقا. في ظل غياب مرشح محافظ حقيقي للرئاسة، ما مصير الحركات المحافظة اليوم؟ لمناقشة صعود الحركة المحافظة وسقوطها ومستقبلها، يسرني أن أرحب بطرف فاعل رئيسي في وسائل الإعلام المحافظة في أمريكا اليوم، وهو الصحفي جيمس أنتل. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. I'm sitting here with Jim Antle to discuss the state of the conservative movement in America today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, from afar, it doesn't look like there is a true conservative in the race for president between the Republicans and Democrats on the ballot this year. Is that fair to say?
Well, a lot of conservatives certainly feel that way. There was an option. There were multiple options, one could argue, for movement conservatives in the Republican primaries. Ted Cruz was the one who did the best, who went the furthest during the Republican nomination contest, but he ultimately didn't win, and he lost to a man whose commitment to conservative principles is at least questionable. Certainly, he has taken a number of policy positions that are at variance with the movement consensus. At the same time, there are a lot of rank-and-file conservatives, a lot of grassroots Republicans who agree with Donald Trump on issues like trade, on issues like immigration, and even to a certain extent on foreign policy issues like the Iraq War, which was once very much a pillar of the Republican national security stance. It was very much considered central to the war on terror. Now you have even Republicans questioning that, and Donald Trump sort of led the way.
So if we could step back for a minute from the inside view of the conservative movement, how did this happen? How did a movement which was so powerful and dominant in the Republican Party not have one of its tried and true candidates take over and take the candidacy?
Well, in one sense, that's nothing new. I mean, if you look quite frequently, the Republican presidential nominee, while conservative, is not considered a movement conservative. They're not a product of that intellectual movement. Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan are really the only two people who really fit that bill who've actually won the Republican presidential nomination. And Reagan became president. Goldwater obviously lost in a fairly substantial landslide, although his campaign had significant long-term impact on the party and the movement. So in one sense, it's not new, but in another sense, it is a little surprising because I think a lot of conservatives thought that this would be their moment. We knew going into this race that the party's governing class, that the Republican establishment was somewhat weak and had lost touch with the base of the party, with the party's voters. we were a little bit more surprised to find out that conservatives might not necessarily be able to take advantage of that, and that perhaps the conservative movement had also lost a little bit of touch with your average Republican voter. How much of this is specific to the fact that Donald Trump is a unique figure, being a celebrity, being very famous, being well known, having a stronger media presence and television savvy than his opponents, and how much of this is an ingrained problem that conservatives are not even speaking for the people for whom they claim to speak, is something that remain to be seen.
So their conventional wisdom is that there are three streams of conservatives: social, fiscal, and defense. Let's take a look at each of these and how they relate to Donald Trump. Are social conservatives, are they in love with Donald Trump, or are they among the most wary of who Trump is?
That's a very interesting question, because the organized social conservatism was very much in favor of Ted Cruz. To a lesser extent, some people were supporting Marco Rubio, not really very supportive of Donald Trump. But social conservatives are, of the three strains, the group of people that Trump has done the most to try to reach out to, and the one that he's actually changed a number of his positions to be their positions. He's adopted their positions on issues. He was pro-choice. He's now says he's pro-life. He has talked a lot about religious liberty. He's talked a lot about how Christianity is being marginalized now in American culture from his perspective. So he has done a lot to woo social conservatives, and social conservatives ended up, and particularly evangelicals, ended up voting for Trump in the primaries in much greater numbers than their leaders were hoping would be the case.
I mean, to me, as an outsider, it seems like a very interesting story. Here, Donald Trump, thrice divorced.
Right.
Probably tough to find a photo of him walking inside a church anytime in his adult life.
Right.
Hillary Clinton obviously has personal family issues, but seems to have a deeper connection with her traditional faith than Trump.
Sure.
Any social conservatives say, well, wait a minute, let's hold off on, Trump is so new to our field here.
There are a lot of social conservatives who, one, dislike Trump's personal life and think that it makes social conservatives appear hypocritical with their criticism of Bill Clinton, that they're now embracing a man who has had some similar, not entirely identical, but some similar problems. Certainly has not always, he swears a lot, and he was adulterous in past marriages, and so these are things that if Bill Clinton was doing them, certainly social conservatives would be very much opposed to him. At the same time, they oppose Bill Clinton and oppose Hillary Clinton now, really primarily because of his social liberalism, and as a practical matter, because social conservatives are so dependent on how the judiciary rules on a lot of their core issues. Many of them feel uncomfortably, they're kind of forced into this alliance with Trump, because he's at least saying that he is going to appoint judges who will rule favorably for them. And on social issues like marriage, abortion, the scope of religious liberty, that's really very heavily dependent on what the Supreme Court and other courts rule, and a lot of those issues can be taken out of the legislative process entirely with some unfavorable court decisions. So social conservatives face a really tough choice. Many of them find it unpalatable, but Trump has done a lot more to try to assuage them than he's done with other facets of the conservative movement.
Now, you wrote a book about big government, and your deep concern that we're not getting rid of big government.
Right.
When you look at these two candidates, and specifically in terms of this discussion,
right,
Mr. Trump, are you worried that he is, in his own way, an advocate of big government?
Oh, absolutely. And Donald Trump, has demonstrated no seriousness about fiscal conservatism, no real seriousness about constitutional issues. He doesn't seem to regard the Constitution primarily as a document that limits the reach and the scope of the federal government. So for those of us who share that perspective, that's very concerning. The Republican Party has always been somewhat weak as a party of limited government. We've had the Democratic Party as a party of the welfare state, and that being very central to its approach to how the economy should be run, and frankly how Democrats can win elections. Republicans have always struggled a bit more. Sometimes they kind of run as, we're going to be the cheaper option of, we're going to do all these same things that Democrats would do, but we're not going to spend as much money or raise your taxes as much doing it. So we were starting to see with the Tea Party some more serious limited government types like Rand Paul and Mike Lee, and to some extent even Ted Cruz ascend in American politics. And so the thought was that maybe the GOP was going to become a more serious limited government party. And then you nominate Donald Trump, who really harkens back more to Richard Nixon. I mean, this is a sort of cultural conservatism, nationalism that's not really that committed to the ideas of limited government.
So just for our viewers to understand, Richard Nixon, pivotal figure in American politics, major Republican president,
Right.
but not viewed as a conservative.
Not viewed as a conservative. I mean, when Nixon was president, when we had wage and price controls, Nixon created the Environmental Protection Agency. Nixon was not really somebody who did much to roll back tax rates. More conservative than his Democratic opponents, certainly. Appealed to conservatives while he was winning elections. Nixon, in some ways, is really more the model of what establishment Republicans are like. But establishment Republicans, at least since Reagan, have really felt that they had to say and do a lot of conservative things. Donald Trump, at least on the size of government front, really hasn't felt the need to do those kinds of things. It's law and order. It's our culture is under siege. All of those are things that resonate with certain strains of conservatives too. But in terms of limited government, cutting spending, he really doesn't talk about things like that. He'd like to spend more money on American infrastructure projects, for example. He really wants a powerful, well-run government. Seems to be his pitch, and he's the man to run it.
So he's making a conscious effort to appeal to social conservatives, but not really making a conscious effort to appeal to fiscal conservatives.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more with Jim Antle about defense conservatives, Donald Trump, and the overall impact on the conservative movement in American politics in just a moment. My guest today again is W. James Antle. He is the Washington Examiner's political editor. Previously, he served as managing editor of the Daily Caller, associate editor of the American Spectator, and senior writer for the American Conservative. So let's ask about the third branch of conservatives in America, defense, national security conservatives. Here it seems Trump is going directly against the grain. Is that correct?
In many areas, yes, he is. I mean, Donald Trump vocally opposed the Iraq War. There is some debate about when and how far in advance of the war he actually opposed it, but even to be against it in 2004 is very early for most conservative Republicans, or most Republicans, period. I mean, it would be kind of early if they opposed it last week for a lot of them. So for Trump to have been against it that far out, that's really flying in the face of what a lot of national security conservatives believe. Trump clearly believes that sees the world in terms of the United States is getting cheated out of resources, rather than most national security conservatives think it's important for America to play an active leadership role in the world, and Trump doesn't see it as much as leadership. He sees it as other countries taking advantage of us. So in that sense, he's very much at odds with what a lot of defense conservatives believe. However, he has adopted a number of conservative defense proposals borrowed from a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation. Their plans for how much the military should be built up, what we should spend on the military, what weapons programs require the most support, what the size of the military should be. So those two positions kind of sit uneasily next to each other. he seems to be groping toward a position of having a strong military that is used sparingly, which traditionally is a conservative point of view, but for the last 50, 60 years or so, the mainstream conservative movement has favored a much more activist foreign policy than what Trump is currently espousing.
So a bigger investment in defense spending. I'm not hearing you mention one of the magic words one has heard from conservatives in the last 20 years, democracy.
Right.
As being a pillar of American foreign policy.
Trump is very much a skeptic of promoting democracy in countries where he feels it will empower people who will be anti-American. Trump is much more of a throwback to the view that it's more important for governments, foreign governments, to be pro-American and aligned with U.S. interests than to be democratic. There are a lot of other conservatives who believe that even if in the short term it might work against our interests to promote democracy in certain areas, that in the long term it serves our interests for these countries to be democratic. Trump rejects that, and he can make some arguments that recent democracy promotion efforts in the world have not fared very well. And I think that's made a lot of rank and file Republicans more open to his arguments and less receptive to what the conservative movement is saying.
So we've been using the terms conservative and Republican, if not interchangeable, we've been going back and forth with them.
Right.
What percentage of conservatives would you say in the end are going to end up voting Republican? And for those that aren't, where are they turning? Third parties, Hillary Clinton, staying home?
I still think a large majority of self-described conservatives will vote Republican, will vote for Donald Trump in November. It's an ingrained habit. Hillary Clinton is very much unacceptable to the overwhelming majority of them. So I suspect that that will be the case. However, there will be a somewhat higher than normal number of people who stay home, of people who vote for third-party candidates, most likely Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, and Evan McMullin, an independent conservative who's running in some states, who's on the ballot in some states. And then you'll have some Washington conservatives and some New York conservatives will vote for Hillary Clinton. These people will not be very large in number, but they will be more influential conservatives who will be doing that. And that really does show the degree to which the movement is kind of in flux. We've, for 20, 30 years, been hearing how the worst thing that could possibly happen from these conservatives is having Hillary Clinton elected president. And now you have some of these very same conservatives saying, now wait a minute, maybe there's something worse than that, Donald Trump.
And so I'm hearing you say that there's little enthusiasm, although the majority will fall in line. Is there already planning among conservatives to as to how they might take their party back in the post-election era?
Well, a lot obviously depends on the outcome of the election. If Trump is defeated, I think many conservatives hope that Trump's success was unique to him. It was something that he was able to do as a businessman with a lot of money and as a celebrity who already was very well known, running against a large field of candidates who had trouble distinguishing themselves from each other, much less distinguishing themselves against him. And if that is the case, then simply conservatives go back to doing what they were doing. And if nothing else, this has revealed that the party establishment, which has traditionally been the conservative movement's foe within the Republican Party, is badly weakened and can be defeated in the primaries. The tradition has been establishment candidates are normally the nominee. We've seen them gradually weaken, and now we know they can be beaten. So conservatives who are optimistic and think that Trump is sort of a phenomenon individually rather than an ideological phenomenon are hopeful because they have a movement behind them, and that Trump will go away at some point after the election, that they can retake the party that way. What is more problematic is if some of the ideas that Trump is associated with and running on really do represent the party's voters more than movement conservatives had thought, and maybe more than some of the things that movement conservatives believe. If that is the case, there will still be problems in terms of who takes up these issues after Trump, what kind of institutions promote them. I mean, conservatives have magazines, they have think tanks. Trump, there are a couple of websites maybe that are sympathetic to some of the things that Trump is specifically promoting, but they don't have the same institutional heft or money behind them. How does that take shape? If there is a way for that to take shape, maybe conservatives will find that they have a rival within the Republican Party other than the party establishment, and that will be a very new and interesting development.
Fascinating discussion. Jim Antle, thank you so much for joining us on Dakhel, Washington today. بهذا نصل إلى نهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة، وخاصة حول المعركة بين المحافظين والليبراليين في السياسة الأمريكية، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@alhurra.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.